every child and their parent to pick where to go. But in a time when you have a liberal Democratic president who has the courage to take on the establishment in education and who's prepared to say every state should adopt dramatic, bold reforms, I think as if politics is the art of the possible, our children deserve a chance to see us come together, to put their future above partisanship, and to find a way to take on the establishment in both parties and try to get this solved.
I think that both parties have failed, but I think others have failed. I think unions have failed. I think parents have failed. I think community leaders have failed. I would not agree with Pell Grant, but I agree with him that we've got to find the common ground. And what President Obama said to us in the meeting in the Oval Office in May is if we agree on 70%, can't we achieve that? We've got to move forward. The problem is that we've all stayed within our battle lines, and the kids have suffered. When we have gone out in these cities so far, Dave, the kids don't care that he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat, he was the speaker, I'm a civil rights leader. They care that they say the teachers seem to have not cared about me. Now I have teachers that do. It seems like no one has any expectations. The new racism to me is low expectations, where these kids are being told you can't be anything, you can't achieve something. They can, and we must make that happen.
All right, I want to talk specifically about Race to the Top, this effort, and some specific challenges that you face, one of which is a disagreement with the unions on some issues on the core issue of accountability for this results problem. We know that the teachers union does not agree with the idea of standardized testing being an indicator of student performance. We've sought out some points of view from educators around the country that I want to be part of this discussion, interviews that we did. One of them was with Randi Weingarten, of course, who's the head of the American Federation of Teachers. She spoke to this accountability issue for teachers. This is what she said.
A part of why the union keeps fighting against the demonization and scapegoating of teachers who are really trying to do their utmost to help kids is because we know we have to create a culture of shared responsibility. Let's create systems that better support teachers, that mentor teachers, that help us do our jobs. And if there are people that are not making the grade, let's figure out ways, which we've tried to do now with peer review and other kinds of programs, to counsel them out and to remove them from the profession, but in a humane way. That's what we mean by us stepping up more.
She talks about shared responsibility, but educators are saying, where is the shared responsibility, the accountability among the unions? Michelle Rhee, who I mentioned, head of D.C. schools, talks about the accountability question from her point of view. Watch.
The one topic that is most important to address in public education today, in my opinion, is how we are going to implement a system of accountability. For far too long, we have had children in our districts who are failing academically, and all of the adults have been able to keep their jobs and keep their contracts and that sort of thing, and that dynamic has to change.
So here's my question, Secretary Duncan. Why should anybody believe that a Democratic president who relies on interests like the unions who are out there organizing and who vote, why should somebody believe that he's really going to take them on, that you are really going to take them on to force accountability?
We all have to move, and at the end of the day, we have to have dramatically better results for children. What makes great education is the adults. Talent matters tremendously. In every high-performing school in this country, you have great principals and you have great teachers. Student achievement is the purpose of education. We need to evaluate whether students are learning or not. We need to start to focus on outcomes, not inputs. And as both these two gentlemen said, we all have to move outside our comfort zones. These old tired fights of the past just don't get us where we need to go. Everybody's moving. Everybody's willing to move. At the end of the day, we want dramatically better outcomes for students. That's the only reason we all work.
So how do you hold teachers accountable, and while at the same time holding the union's feet to the fire?
What we have said, which is a fundamental breakthrough, is we will only invest in those states and districts where student achievement is part of the evaluation.
Right.
We've drawn the line.
What if states lie to you? Because I've talked to educators who say, wait a minute, they can just say, oh, yeah, well, we're gathering the data, but not really gather the data on student performance based on test results and still get the money.
It's very simple. We simply won't fund them. We're talking about everyone moving outside their comfort zone. The Department of Education has been part of the problem. Let me be very, very clear. We have been this big historical, compliance-driven bureaucracy. We are trying to move from that to being this engine of innovation and to invest in and scale up what works. We are only going to invest in those places that are doing the right thing by children. If they're not, we simply will not fund them.
Look, let me just say, this is the heart of the matter. We are all three going around the country on what is essentially a hope. I have no idea in the end whether the president and the secretary will be as tough as they need to be, but I can tell you, we have been in rooms together now in Baltimore and in Philadelphia. Al and I have been in rooms in Tucson and in Montgomery, Alabama, and I have seen Reverend Sharpton in the middle of the Philadelphia power structure be amazingly blunt about the fact that, Randy Weingarten talked about humane. There's nothing humane about a school which destroys children. There's nothing humane about a school that has kids going to prison instead of college. And there's nothing humane about protecting somebody who can't teach so that they have a job for next year. But by the way, every child that's in that room is going to have a terrible future. We had one young man in Baltimore who walked out who said to us, the difference between the school he was now in, which I think was a KIPP school if I remember, and the school that he had left was, in the first school, the one that was failing, the teacher would give them a reading assignment and she would either put her head on the table and sleep, or she would end up doing email without teaching.
During class.
During class.
No, but the other part is that's why I think what the president's proposal as a collective works, because we need parent involvement. I wish you had talked to Assemblywoman Inez Barron in New York. We need to have parents more involved. If parents are involved, they also hold the teachers
accountable. Wait a minute, Reverend. Now, wait a minute. That's an important point, but wait a minute. But hold on. On this union question, you have fights going on in school districts in this country. In New York City, rubber rooms where teachers who are too incompetent or dangerous to be in a classroom can't be fired. You've got teachers in Washington, D.C. who are accused of sexual misconduct with their students who can't be fired. Is that sane?
These things have to be dealt with, and this president has said he will deal with it. But at the same time, you have teachers that have taught long and hard and done great work that have been overlooked, and we've got to have the balance there. I think that NEA and Randy Weingarten want to be part of that conversation. I think that it is unthinkable to me that you have teachers in my community that cannot be disciplined. It also is unthinkable that I've had teachers that made the difference for me that get no reward or no incentive.
And don't get commensurate pay, don't get adequate pay.
Let me speak. Teacher evaluation in this country is basically broken. Great teachers don't get recognized. Right. They don't get rewarded. We don't shine a spotlight on them. We don't learn from them. Teachers in the middle don't get the support that they need. And teachers in the bottom, who frankly need to find another profession, that doesn't happen either. When a system is broken for every adult, high-performing, those in the middle to bottom, if it's broken for every adult, it does not work for children. I spoke before the NEA convention with 5,500 delegates. I spoke before the AFT convention with 2,500 delegates. I said teacher evaluation was broken. Everybody cheered. So we all have to change. This thing doesn't work. We all have to do some things very, very differently. And at the heart has to be results for children.
I just want to, because I think you've done exactly the right thing here, but I want to bring it down to what's wrong with Washington today. The three of us are making a positive gamble. We're each risking to some extent our reputation and our future, saying, what if we come together and what if we actually achieve a breakthrough? Now, we may not. Everything you've raised is exactly right. We may not. But I think the country is tired of politicians finding a reason not to try to work together and not to try to gamble in the future. On this topic, the president has said publicly in speeches, said it when he was a candidate and it didn't help him to get the Democratic nomination, that he favored fundamental change in education even if it made the unions uncomfortable. And I just think we have a chance here to break through in very practical ways, but it does require a gamble on our part of good faith.
We talk about accountability. I also want to talk about how we attract the best teachers, because this is just a huge challenge. Bruce Stewart, who is the former head of school for Sidwell Friends, a private school here in Washington, D.C., spoke to us about that with his ideas. This is what he said.
When I began teaching in the 60s, we had that population of people. And since then, because greater opportunities have opened up for young women and for minorities, there's been a great brain drain from American schools. I think we want to get those people back. If you look at Singapore, look at Finland, the reason they consistently are testing their population of students in the top levels of international exams is the quality of their teaching force. They all come from the top third of their colleges and universities. In the United States, our tendency today is to have that pool of teachers coming from the bottom third of colleges and universities and from the bottom third of those classes. That's something we need to reverse and to change.